Hi! So you've got a Node website running on Express and you want to ensure that your JS and CSS files are combined, minified and served from a reputable CDN. Well, I was in this position recently and was pleasantly surprised by how easy it was to do with an amazing little module called express-cdn. This episode will take you through changing an existing site to use this module and configure your files to be served from Mac CDN. Let's get started. We're going to boost the performance of this little site, which might look a bit familiar to you. I extracted some styles and HTML from tag tree to give us something real world to test on. As you can see, this site currently downloads a bunch of resources, 3 CSS files and 3 script files. We're going to fix that. To get the site source code, we clone it from GitHub and install its npm dependencies. I've set it up so that we can use gulp to run the site with auto reload and Sass compilation. Cool, our playground is up and running. Let's have a look at the source code we pulled down. In our index.js file, we have our basic Express configuration. We're using EJS and we've got our public folder set up. In our Sass folder, we have a file containing our own grid system and another with some additional styles, styling the features with icons. In our public folder, we have some images and scripts. Our Bower components are in here, and we have a JavaScript file containing our roots for page.js, which is a little library that helps you to hook into URL changes. We also have a style sheets folder which contains our compiled Sass files and a CSS file. I got the CSS file when I exported it from Icomoon. I also opted to leave my icon font in the style sheet folder. Our only view pulls in the style sheets and JavaScript files. We've got some HTML that makes good use of our defined styles. Notice that here in the navigation, we've got links that we hook into with page.js. But the important part here is this area with all these JavaScript files and CSS files. Let's get this stuff combined, minified and hosted on a CDN. In Terminal, we install the express-cdn module. In our index.js file, we want to configure our express-cdn module. I've prepared this configuration beforehand, so we can just paste it in here. If you head over to the express-cdn GitHub repo, you'll see that this config is pretty standard. In order to use express-cdn, you need to have an Amazon S3 bucket set up and have credentials configured with write access to it. We provide the URL to our S3 bucket here, the bucket name in here, and the key and secret here. We also need to provide it with a path containing our assets here, and a path containing our view files over here. After the config, we add the CDN view helper onto our Express apps locals. When we check out our console, we see that the module has been hooked in and is now complaining because it walked the views and couldn't find any reference to the view helper being used. In our view file, we're going to replace these references to our style sheets with one call to the CDN view helper. To this helper, we pass an array containing the paths to each of the style sheets. In the console, you can see that the module kicked in, then combined the CSS files and uploaded it to S3. What's even more impressive is that it also picked up that the style sheets reference images and fonts, and also uploaded them to S3. When we refresh our page here, you can see that it downloaded the combined CSS file and logo image from S3. Let's do the same with our scripts. Again, we pull in the CDN helper and pass it an array containing a path for each script we want to pull in. You'll notice that we're using the -ej syntax here, because we don't want any escaping to happen on the return value from the helper when it gets wrapped into the view result. In the console, we can see that the scripts are being combined and uploaded to S3. And when we reload our site with DevTools open, we see that our combined file is now being downloaded from S3. So this is great. We've gone quite far with a teensy bit of work. But what about if we want to debug this? When we change this one value in the config, the files are downloaded as usual, allowing you to have a quick debug cycle and step through your code. As you can see here, the separate files are being downloaded from our local dev server again, so it's quite easy to switch between the two, and you can even drive the config from an environment variable if you don't want to change your code every time. S3 is really not supposed to be used as a CDN. It's only from one location and it gets expensive pretty quickly. Luckily, it's really easy to hook this config up to a real CDN, for which we'll be using max-cdn. In my max-cdn config, I set up a new pull zone and configure it with the URL to my S3 bucket. Once the zone has been set up, we copy this URL over here and paste it into the domain config value here in our config. When we refresh the page, you can see that our resources are being loaded from max-cdn now. All that was done in real time. It's really that quick to configure a max-cdn setup and pull it in. I highly recommend using this CDN. If you want to stick to Amazon, you can opt to configure a CloudFront distribution and point that to your S3 bucket. Then all you need to do is point the domain value in your config to the CloudFront distribution in here. Wow, I thought this screencast would be longer, but it turns out it was really easy to do. I looked at various other asset pipeline modules, but fell in love with the elegance and simplicity of express-cdn. See you next time.